Hey y'all, welcome to the channel. Today we're checking out top 10 real-life British spies and their incredible stories.
Move over 007. Welcome to Watch Mojo UK, and today we'll be counting down our picks for the top 10 real-life British spies. Before we begin, we publish new content every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. For this list, we're only considering people who spied for the British, regardless of whether or not they were British citizens. As such, Brits like Kim Filby, who spied against his own country...
I'm sorry, I was talking over who he said what?
As such, Brits like Kim Filby, who spied against his own country, will not be included.
King Filby? What? Hang on. Who the hell? Oh, Kim Filby. I thought there was a king who betrayed the country or something. Kim Filby. British intelligence officer and a spy for the Soviet Union. He chose the losing side, didn't he? Dang. What an idiot. What a dick. He died in 1988. He probably pooped to death. In 1963, he was revealed to be a member of the Cambridge Five, a spy ring which divulged British secrets to Soviets during World War II. He was a spy during World War II and the Cold War. Why? He chose the losing side. Let's just see how he died. Filby died of heart failure in Moscow in 1988. He was given a hero's funeral. Heart failure. With congestive heart failure, the heart's capacity to pump blood cannot keep up with the body's need. As the heart weakens, blood begins to back up and force liquid through the capillary walls. The term congestive refers to the resulting buildup of fluid. But what I'm looking for is, do you poop? Constipation can be a problem in people with heart failure due to the following reduced fluid intake. So it's like the opposite of pooping to death. Oh well.
Number 10, Kathleen Tesh. A 2017 biography by former MI5 spy master Maxwell Knight revealed the previously unknown identities of 7 British spies. One, codenamed MT, was Kathleen Tesh, and she managed to infiltrate the inner circle of one of the most dangerous individuals in human history, Adolf Hitler.
Wow.
Described as an entirely ordinary and unassuming member of the public, Tesh was a housewife whose modest nature made her the perfect person to get close to the Führer. She even managed to score a face-to-face with Hitler at his home in the German Alps, but ultimately failed to acquire any important secrets about the dictator. However, she did receive a signed copy of Mein Kampf.
She survived. That's an accomplishment. Hey, Kathleen, way to go. She does look so innocent. I don't know, actually. That's a mischievous look. I don't trust that face. Something's going on behind those eyes that she's not telling us. She had tea with Hitler. Kathleen Tesh, a diminutive mother from Buckinghamshire, who had infiltrated a pro-fascist group with links to the Nazis, found herself brought before the German leader as he finalized plans to unleash the most ruinous conflict in human history. When she reported back, she said, Hitler seemed to be quite unaware that I was in the room, and he strongly impressed me as a man who lives in a dream world entirely of his own. It makes sense. A good deal of time was spent in complete silence, which I tried to break by making such idiotic remarks as, what a very beautiful view. To be candid, I felt rather uncomfortable. No kidding. The encounter and the identity of Mrs. Tesh, who remarkably kept her cool during the encounter despite having worked for MI5 for less than a year and received no training, joining a far-right organization called The Link, which boasted of its ability to introduce members to senior Nazis. It was during one such trip Mrs. Tesh found herself on a coach outing with fellow British fascists in the Bavarian Alps to look from afar at the Kelstein House, or Eagle's Nest, a mountain retreat used by Hitler. When 2 uniformed Nazis boarded the coach and began shouting Mrs. Tesh's name, she became concerned that her cover had been blown. Hell yeah! Can you imagine? 2 Nazis just shouting your name. You never heard of them. You never met them before, and they know who you are. In a report of the incident, she wrote, I must admit that for a moment I got a bit of a fright. I was asked to come out of the coach, which I did, and was then taken up to the house and inside. After waiting in a room for a while, I was taken into another room where Hitler was sitting in an armchair. She said, he looks much older and much more careworn than his photographs appear. And though this may sound a silly description of him, I can only describe him as he appeared to me, a man who was burnt up with a kind of fire, and the next absolutely spent and unaware of anything. It later transpired that the reason the British agent had been granted an audience with Hitler was that her German surname had been spotted by aides, and the despot had wanted to tell her in person that her name was a very honored one in Germany. Wow. Somewhat bemused, she left the eagle's nest holding a signed copy of Mein Kampf, embossed to with a silver eagle presented to her by the Nazi leader. Great work, Mrs. Tesh. Way to go.
Number 9, Eric Roberts. A bank clerk by day and an MI5 agent by night, Eric Roberts first served to stop the flow of communism into Britain in the 1920s, but by the 1930s, a larger threat was sweeping Europe: fascism. Roberts again went undercover, this time by posing as a Gestapo officer and infiltrating right-wing organizations in Britain. Using the alias Jack King, Roberts became so entrenched within enemy circles that he would often convince people to hand over top-secret information under the guise that he would personally deliver it to members of the Third Reich. Roberts left the service and the country in 1956, having become suspicious of the government for which he had risked so much.
Oh. First of all, the name Jack King, I'm surprised his cover wasn't blown. Eric Roberts was suspected of being a double agent, even though he wasn't, or, as far as we know he wasn't. Roberts wrote of his anxiety and frustration about his time in the service and stated that he believed he had been followed and spied on by agents in London. He also wrote that he had not felt accepted by colleagues in MI5. He died in 1972, but it doesn't say what, so he probably pooped to death. God bless you, Eric Roberts.
Number 8, Christina Scarbeck.
Cool
Tales
name.
of Christina Scarbeck feel as if they were ripped from the pages of Fleming. Perhaps that's why she's often said to have been the inspiration for Casino Royale's Vesper Lind. A Polish countess,
noteworthy.
Scarbeck fled her home country at the onset of World War II and became an agent for Britain's Special Operations Executive. Some of her exploits include parachuting behind enemy lines to make contact with the French resistance, skiing out of Poland with top-secret information, and escaping torture by biting down on her tongue and coughing up blood to simulate a bout of tuberculosis. One of World War II's longest-serving female agents, legend holds that Winston Churchill himself referred to her as his favorite spy. High praise indeed.
She bit her tongue to fake tuberculosis. That's a good spy. She would do warfare missions in Nazi-occupied Poland and France. Hellhole. Scarbeck's most famous exploit was securing the release of SOE agents Francis Kamertz and Zan Fielding from a German prison hours before they were to be executed. She did so by meeting, at great personal risk, with the Gestapo commander in Dine-les-Bains, France, telling him she was a British agent and persuading him with treats, lies, and a 2 million franc bribe to release the SOE agents. The event is fictionalized in the last episode of the British television show Wish Me Luck. What a badass. She was stabbed to death in a hotel in London in 1952. It doesn't say who did it.
Number 7, Jimmy Dixon. Whereas most people can hardly find time
He
to go
looks
to
like
the
James
gym,
Bond.
Jimmy Dixon took it upon himself to infiltrate various dissident groups when he wasn't working for the Ministry of Labour or writing novels. Dixon is yet another in a long line of spies who was brought in by Maxwell Knight in the years between World War I and World War II. Using the codename M3, Dixon managed to get in with both the communists and the fascists in his time with MI5. In doing so, he proved to be a valuable asset to British intelligence, helping to disrupt those individuals and groups that the agency hoped to eradicate from British society.
This guy was so into spying that he did it without even actually being an official spy. What kind of person is that? I bet he was a big gambler. I bet he loved risk. He doesn't have a Wikipedia page. What am I supposed to do? He looks like a spy.
Number 6, Graham Pollard. Living a double life can't be easy. However, if Henry Hemming's M. Maxwell Knight MI5's greatest spy master is to be believed, Graham Pollard made it doubly hard on himself. The son of a prominent historian, Pollard followed in his father's footsteps and became a bibliographer. However, unlike his old man, Graham Pollard had another pastime, infiltrating the British Communist Party. A member of Maxwell Knight's spy circle, Pollard went so far as to marry a Communist Party member, which in terms of improving your cover is right up there with moving to the USSR and changing your name to Lenin.
He got married for it. Graham, what is a bibliographer exactly? As a discipline is traditionally the academic study of books as physical cultural objects. In this sense is also known as a bibliology. He studied books, not just the contents of the books, but books. Boring. It's probably why he was a spy. He was probably so bored at work. How did he die? He died at the Radcliffe Infirmary in November 1976. Of what? It doesn't say. So...
Number 5. Mona Mond. In 1999, the press discovered that Melita Norwood, a former British civil servant, had since the 1930s been passing state secrets to the Soviet Union. Incredibly, Norwood had been identified decades earlier by MI5 agent Mona Mond, who'd found evidence of Norwood's treason while attempting to subvert the British Communist Party. Mond informed her superiors only to be dismissed based on her gender. Jasper Harker, Mond's boss, was notoriously sexist when it came to female spies and claimed that they were not cut out for the work. As such, he ignored Mond's suspicions, and Norwood, notably also a woman, was able to continue spying for the Soviets until the 1970s.
So Mona Mond discovered this other lady was spying for the Soviets. She told MI5, and they didn't believe her because she was a woman. Or they didn't think it was important because the person she was telling on was a woman. What idiots. So when Mona died, people still didn't know she was a spy, and it came out later in a book in 2017. That's good spy work. She might be the best spy on this list. We don't even have a photo of her. Way to go, Mona. You did it.
Number 4. Sidney Riley. In true spy novel fashion, Sidney Riley's exploits and personal history are shrouded in mystery. The Russian-born agent had his hands in a number of different international incidents, including the Boer War, the Russo-Japanese War, and World War I. He came to London in the 1890s and before long had himself a new passport and a new gig, informing for Scotland Yard's special branch. A womanizer with a penchant for gambling and high society, Riley was as captivating as he was dangerous. Nicknamed the Ace of Spies, Riley's espionage ways were finally put to an end in 1925 when, upon returning to Russia, he was executed for his role in a failed assassination attempt on Vladimir Lenin in 1918.
He tried to kill Vladimir Lenin. Y'all, they mention he was a gambler. I told you, these spies, they're risk takers, and risk takers like to gamble. He stole weapon plans from the Germans. So he tried to kill Vladimir Lenin. He escaped Russia, went back to England, but then he tried to go back to Russia because he had to make sure that some of his friends were still alive. But he never came back. That would make a good movie. Oh, there have been movies about it. Riley, Ace of Spies. Oh, wow, okay. A 1983 Tim's Television miniseries was about him. Oh, and James Bond. Riley is listed as an inspiration for James Bond. James Bond was a Russian.
Number 3. William Stevenson. Having accrued valuable information about the German war machine through his numerous business ventures, William Stevenson was tapped by none other than Winston Churchill to head up the British Security Coordination in 1940, and was given dominion over all British intelligence operations in the Western Hemisphere during World War II. Codenamed Intrepid, the Canadian-born Stevenson did everything from setting up secret training facilities to overseeing the transfer of secrets between Britain and the United States. Stevenson's intelligence network fed both countries valuable information throughout the war and played an instrumental role in bringing down the Third Reich. Ian Fleming summed it up best when he quipped, "James Bond is a highly romanticized version of a true spy. The real thing is William Stevenson."
Okay, so I guess this William Stevenson is the main influence for James Bond? He was a Canadian. I wouldn't think Canada would produce Spies. His code name was Intrepid. That's some high-stakes stuff, man. Can you imagine being in the middle of World War II and spying on the Nazis? Oh, in 1979, Stevenson was portrayed by David Niven in the miniseries A Man Called Intrepid. This isn't telling me how he died. I'm sure he did not poop to death. He was an honorable man.
Number 2. Odette Hallows. Her
What a
exploits are often overshadowed by those of her male counterparts, but when the dust settled, Odette Hallows walked away World War II's most decorated
What's going on
spy.
there in that photo?
A mother of 3, Hallows stumbled into spy work by accident after she mistakenly sent photographs of the French coastline intended for the Admiralty to the War Office. She was soon recruited by the Special Operations Executive and trained as an intelligence officer. The bulk of Hallows' work occurred behind enemy lines after sneaking into occupied France in 1942. Using the codename Lise, Hallows became a member of the Spindle Network,
some medals.
serving as a courier. She was tortured and imprisoned later in the war, but didn't break, for which she would later earn the George Cross.
She was tortured, y'all. Odette Hallows. She survived to 1995. I love that she just stumbled into it because she sent photos of the French coast to the wrong people. MI5 was like, hey, you got a camera? You're recruited. She was aided in her endurance in prison by her early blindness and paralysis, and by the example of her grandfather, who did not accept weakness very easily. She also accepted in advance that she might be captured by the Germans. Oh, so she set herself up to be, like, mentally she was ready to be captured. She adopted an attitude of defiance and found that this resulted in a degree of respect by her captors and helped her survive the imprisonment mentally. Wow. So she didn't... Okay, wow. The Nazis respected her for being a tough old broad. She said she believed she was not brave, not courageous, but just made up her mind about certain things. She recalled in a post-war interview that while everyone has a breaking point, her feeling was that if she could survive the next minute without breaking up, that is another minute of life. And if I can think that way instead of thinking what is going to happen in a half hour's time, because of her past illnesses, she knew I was able to accept this and survive it. By accepting death, she felt that they would not win anything. They'll have a dead body useless to them. They won't have me. I won't let them have me. She described it as a kind of bargaining. The Germans generally found persons of the prisoner's own nationality to carry out the torture, she later recalled, so that one could not say they were tortured by Germans. Her torture was carried out by a very good-looking young Frenchman who she believed was mentally ill. Ugh. She went to Ravensbrück concentration camp. When the Allies were only a few miles from Ravensbrück, the camp commandant forced her into his car and drove to the advancing Americans to surrender. He hoped that her supposed connections to the Prime Minister might allow him to negotiate his way out of execution. She removed his pistol, which is now held in the Imperium War Museum. Wow. Yeah. She's number 2? Oh my gosh. I hope she has like a monument or something. This is amazing. Odette Hallows. Wow. Like that level of dedication and like that strength, that mental strength is so impressive. I gotta learn from that. I mean, I hope that I will never be captured and tortured. I mean, you never know, right? You never know. Just think about the next minute ahead. Don't think about further along than that. If I can survive the next minute, that's one more minute of life. Hardcore, y'all. Odette Hallows. Wow.
For which she would later earn the George Cross. Number
Cross.
1,
Okay.
Eddie Chapman. A professional criminal, Chapman was serving a 3-year prison sentence in the Channel Islands when Germany invaded in 1940. To escape, he offered to spy for them, and with his unique skill set and apparent hatred of the British government, they happily accepted. However, the moment Chapman returned to Britain, he flipped and became a British double agent. With the help of MI5, Chapman pretended to sabotage a British aircraft factory, and the Germans bought it, going so far as to award Chapman for it. Codenamed Agent Zigzag, Chapman survived the war and was later pardoned for his pre-war crimes.
Look at that photo. Yo, this photo. This guy's a badass. I love these stories. He fooled the Nazis, y'all. It's so good. Where are the Channel Islands? Probably in the English Channel, you dumbass. Right? Okay, yeah. They're right off. Okay, those little guys. How did he fake sabotage? Oh, they faked damage of the aircraft factory and he took credit for it. So the German spy planes flew over and took photos and it just looked like it was sabotage from the air. And Eddie was like, I did that. This just makes the Nazis look really dumb. I feel like Odette Hallows should be number 1 and Eddie Chapman should be maybe number 3 or 4. You know, I'm still impressed with Kathleen Tesh and being in the room with Hitler. Can you imagine? She must have been freaking out. I think I would be so nervous I would just vomit everywhere. These are some great spy stories. No wonder James Bond is British. And you know what's crazy? There are probably exponentially more stories that we have never heard and will never hear because it's just secret. We don't know what happened. It wasn't documented. We'll never know. Crazy. This was fascinating. Thank you all for watching this with me, and I'll see you next time. Later.